Hello, and welcome to Brand Clarity by Visions to Images, where we focus on strategy and business development for entrepreneurs at all different levels through branding and digital marketing techniques. Susie Liberatore is the founder and art director of Visions to Images Creative Services, LLC. For the last decade, she has personally been instrumental in bridging gaps between the global digital market and neighborhood locations for some of the biggest brands around. Growth is possible for even a single location with the right professional branding techniques and Susie's signature strategies of Visions to Images. Stand out from your competitors and bring your visions to life while watching your sales skyrocket. Your host for this is Susie Liberatore, owner of Visions to Images. Hello, everybody. Today on the podcast, I have James Louie, and he is with the franchise department as a partner. And him and I have been talking back and forth about franchises and emerging brands. And I'm super excited to just have him on here and share his knowledge. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this field.
Hi, Susie. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be on with you. So getting into the field is a long story. I feel like everybody in franchising has some convoluted pathway to however the heck they got into it and how they've stuck into it for so long. So I've been in franchising since 2015. I have a finance background. I candidly never really knew anything about franchising as an industry before I came across the St. Gregory Development Group and Cycle Bar Franchising in 2015. So anyone in franchising probably remembers that name and knows that growth concept. I came out of a private wealth management job looking for just something a little bit different and found Cycle Bar Franchising, which was a very young concept at the time in 2015, based out of Cincinnati. So the team was hiring, they were launching franchising, and I just kind of dove in, saw an interesting opportunity with a young concept. I took the job, and I did not have at the time a title or a role. Just kind of jumped in, dove in, and all of a sudden I was inside franchising and have kind of been there ever since. So, found the industry back in 2015, the very beginning of Cycle Bar Franchising, and have just grown and worked with different emerging franchise concepts ever since, and kind of fell in love with it. It was an interesting pathway for me, but has been an extremely rewarding one. I mentioned the finance background, worked in private wealth management for a while. Franchise development for myself and my business partner has been a really cool industry for us to grow in, because we're tapping into our finance and our economics backgrounds. And we're able to, really grow and work with both emerging brand founders, so people, the franchisors, as well as the franchisees. So we kind of fell in, and we've been stuck in it ever since.
Yeah, so I love the concept, and I feel like emerging brands are hit or miss, and they need that help and support, right? Especially there's so much involved in a franchise that is emerging and or a big franchise, right? There's just so much involved, and half the time people don't even have that help and support that they need. So tell me, how you actually, what do you do for these emerging brands, and who's ideal for you?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, franchising in and of itself it's not a new business model, right? It's been around for a long time. It's always been a very productive growth model for, what were at one time local brands with a effective and a replicable business model that they could take and scale across the country, internationally, et cetera. Now, since I've gotten into franchising, and certainly over the last number of years, the industry has seen some change, and it's seen some more rapid growth than ever before, which has attracted more young concepts than ever. And every year we have more and more different, what were local regional concepts that decide to utilize franchising as their growth strategy. They've seen the benefits, and they want to take advantage themselves. So, what we often find in the niche that we're looking to fill is those emerging concepts, they're great at what they do. They have a very successful business model. But what they don't often realize is that franchising in and of itself is taking on a very different business model than what they're used to doing. We work with a lot of fitness concepts, fitness, wellness, beauty, the industry we find ourselves in quite a bit, just based on our, our early work with Cycle Bar, Shred 415, the Now Massage, or great fitness wellness brands. We find ourselves continuing to fall into that. And we work with founders all the time who are great at building that fitness community, putting a workout together. But what they don't have is the infrastructure for what it takes to build what is a franchise company behind it. And my business partner and I, Chris Mybers, we come from that. We have lived on the back end of franchisors now for the last 8, 9 years, and have sat in and operated within almost every executive role within those organizations. So we bring that knowledge to that local business owner to create the franchise program. That's what we're looking for. Somebody who has a great knowledge of their local business, wants to scale via franchising, but candidly doesn't want to make all the mistakes that a typical group would make when they jump into the franchise world and try to grow from there. So we look for concepts and founders who have proven their business locally, know they want to grow, maybe don't have the team or the bandwidth inside their current organization to make that leap and to take that next growth step. And we really like to partner in there as a member of that team and as a long-term growth partner to spend, sometimes 6, 18, 24 months really cultivating that business, building the franchise program from, compliance, franchise disclosure documents, franchise agreements, all the way through the franchise program. That's where, we really facilitate is that early, business model development. Whether that's the early 10-year pro forma to prove out, hey, franchise growth is an effective and potentially profitable path for you, but also it's that support system that they may not understand what it looks like, from vendor coordination to real estate site selection to franchise training to whatever it may be inside that system. So we candidly, it's kind of it's where the name the franchise department came from. We like to bolt on as the franchising arm for emerging local concepts. We also do, of course, work with groups that are younger in the franchise space. They maybe have already franchised. They've got between a number of units open, looking to take that leap and make the next step in their growth. So we work with concepts like that as well all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say all that. I mean, I that makes my head spin, to be honest, because that's all stuff that I would never even be able to do, right? And that's why we outsource stuff. But I love the local visibility and how people can really grow the franchise base. And I mean, we've worked with emerging brands, et cetera, and franchisees who need help and support to grow in either B2C or B2B, either way. And what I think is always interesting is people always get hung up on the money, right? And I think that's life. We all always get hung up on money. But a lot of times, especially when people come to me, how much is it going to cost me, et cetera. But if you do it right the first time, you're going to make more money and quicker and easier. Right. And I think that's true with you in that sense too, right? Like if people try to do it on their own or try to say, well, I'll come back to you in 6 months, and then they're still in the same spot or they screwed up. So tell me a little bit, have you ran into those kinds of situations?
Definitely. One of the things we see all the time, and I love that you brought this up earlier, because one of the things we see all the time is the misunderstanding for what it takes to actually launch a franchise program. Because, and it's been seen over and over again now in the last number of years, where a concept will throw an FDD together, they'll run off to franchise, they'll sign a bunch of franchise partners, and then look at themselves 20 or 30 units in and say, what the heck have I gotten myself into? The tail starts to wag the dog very quickly. Yeah. When there is, there's not a substantial financial acumen up front, or candidly, the capital and the team that it takes to support that system. So we see that all the time. One of the things that we stress very early on, and candidly, my partner and I and our extended team, our goal every year, and we'll be close to it this year, is to talk to, upwards of 100 potential franchise concepts, right? Groups that are, they've put a flyer out there that says, hey, we think we want to franchise. Because we start with, the capital requirements, the financing needs, and candidly, the business model and pro forma behind the concept and behind being a franchisor. We talk more concepts out of franchising than we do into it. We would rather look at a concept today and say, hey, this may not be right for you for these reasons. So they never get to a place where all of a sudden they have to sell additional units to support the system. They have to, award franchises to maybe underqualified franchise partners, or, people that aren't the right fit, or markets that may not be the right fit, or outsource some of their sales services to groups that may do that for them, but potentially take away some of the upside on the franchise fee or the royalties or pieces of that sort. That just started to turn the business model on its head and not allow the franchisor to grow effectively, forces them into a growth path that may not be appropriate for them. We stress that need up front. We make sure always they understand the capital requirements to get a franchisor company up and running, whether that be the dollars it takes for legal and compliance work, or candidly the additional working capital for human capital, for hiring a team internally to be able to support that system. once it
Right.
is going.
Yeah, definitely. You need that team for support. You can't grow without it. And I mean, I've noticed that over my years of being an owner too. Like I can't do it all, right? So I've been growing and building all of that. There's so much behind the franchise though that I mean, like you're talking about all these terms and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know too much about all that. Like, that's not my forte. But there is a lot when any company wants to be that franchise and build and get locations. And I know I've talked to a few different people, getting the FDAs and all these compliances and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's hard and it takes a
Yeah.
lot of time and a lot of money. It's amazing to really see, emerging brands come to life like that.
Yeah, it's a big jump for a lot of groups, and there are ways to grow more effectively, and there are great groups out there that can help brands grow that way. I know a lot of them that do it locally. I know a lot of them that outsource different ways. I mean, it's interesting conversation that we have every day. There is not one way to franchise. We've seen now, especially in the fitness industry, we've seen extremely rapid growth from some of these concepts. F45, Cycle Bar was that story back in 2016 and 17. We've seen brands like that just explode on the growth side, and that is what a lot of people see is like, hey, that's the way I want to go. They see
Right.
fast growth, they see
Yeah.
national takeover, and then they see private equity money
Yeah.
at the end of that road, right? They see the ability to have a capital partner and make a capital event when that time comes. But the thing we preach more often than not is that every brand has its own growth path. Not every concept has to be a 500 unit franchise. There is a profitable business model behind a 30 unit fitness franchise that's regional to Texas and Arizona, right? Like there's a great business model there. And I think what people fail to understand or misconceive about the industry is that you have to be a national brand. You have to sell 100 units in your first year. You
That's
have to do all these
interesting.
things. And we look at it very differently. We
Yeah.
look at it as like, one, understanding, like, is this what you really want to do? One of the things we talk about all the time is, as a business owner, do you really want to be a franchisor? Do you all of a sudden want to have a number of franchise partners relying on you
Right.
for the success of their business? And the answer is no. Then very quickly we decide it's not the path for you.
Hey there, I want to interrupt this episode with a quick message. If you're listening to this podcast episode and want to learn about branding your franchise or small business, then go to brandingbridge.com. That's branding-bridge.com.
But then we always look at that pathway to 30 open units. What does that look like for a brand? And that may take 5 years, that may take 10 years, it may take 2 years. It depends on what they're into, it depends on the industry that they're in. We candidly do most of our work in brick and mortar businesses. That's just kind of that's our bread and butter. We understand, the commercial retail space, the unit economics on that are much easier for us to get our hands behind. But candidly, the unit economics aren't as juicy as the B2B space, right? So when you talk about franchising, you got to talk about the B2B versus the brick and mortar. And we end up in brick and mortar more often, but it's interesting because it's a big lift on the front end. But what people really need to understand is, what does that lift? Like where is the payoff on that investment, both from a time and from a capital perspective when they reach their goals, whether that be 30 units or 500.
That's so interesting because I've ran into similar conversations where some people are like, "Oh, I want to be nationwide," and then some people are like, "Hey, I just want like 30 or 50 locations." And so it's very interesting that you talked on that topic because you don't need to have this huge nationwide franchise based on your company, right? Like, and you really have to dive in. It's the same with marketing. Like, how do you want to get there? What do you need to get there? All of that kind of stuff. And it seems like you go through a lot of great tactics to help them and grow with them.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good comparison. It's very similar to marketing. We have to identify what our customer profile is, or what is our growth profile, and we always start with the unit level economics. One, that's our comfort zone. Chris
Yeah.
is a former CFO, and
Oh,
we both have finance
yeah.
backgrounds, but we're both operations based and operators at heart. So we look at the bottoms up unit economics model to understand, what can this single unit model deliver. And is that single unit model something that makes sense in every market,
Yeah.
or does it only make sense in certain markets? And then candidly, who does it make sense to partner with? We talk all the time about, hey, like, one, what does the profitability statement look like? If we're going to talk, the compliance terms, what is the initial investment? What's the item 7? What
Yeah.
is the potential profitability? What's the item 19, right? Like those are the numbers. Those are the things that
Speaking gibberish.
those are the things that prove out on paper, right? Like that's
Okay.
something you have to look at in terms of the concept, but the intangible is that growth path. And people look at it and say, I can I made this business work in, we're both in Cleveland, Ohio. I made it work in Cleveland, Ohio. I could do it. Like I did it just fine. Anybody can do this. Well, that more often than not, that market segment, but more appropriately, that franchisee candidate, that franchise partner is the most important part of the growth process. If you work with, and we use the term award, if you award franchise licenses to the wrong business partners, especially early on, you cap your growth potential and you encumber your ability to grow successfully. There is a profile for each type of concept. I mean, the franchise industry is growing every day. It continues to. Every time I look on LinkedIn, I see, new units awarded, which is a great thing. And people are seeing that as a way, especially after, recession and then shutdown, and ability to get out of a typical workspace and work for themselves. So there's a lot of people coming to the industry to say, hey, it's a good place for me to spend my time, really to gain an income and to have a long-term revenue model that doesn't rely on a W-2. And now that what happens there then is you get a lot of people who may be interested in something, but that fit may not be right for them. So while we're talking about, hey, ability for a strong business model, a capital investment on the front, identifying the correct and the appropriate franchise candidate avatar, something we spend a lot of time on, because you find yourself, franchise agreements are 10-year agreements, right? Yeah. So you're locked in with this person for 10 years at a minimum. You want to make sure you choose the right people that are going to be right for your system, for your culture. And candidly, especially as an emerging concept, we talk about all the time, you need some entrepreneurial individuals to join with you early on, because they are, candidly, your first franchise partner. It's like Lewis and Clark. They're heading out into uncharted waters. A lot of groups have never scaled before without their internal team. And if they're going to lean on somebody to help you do that, it's important to take some time to investigate that individual, that market they're going into, and their ability to deal with some rocky road as they open up that first location.
Agreed. So my last question for you is, if you had any advice to give somebody, whether they're in the franchise or entrepreneurship, like what advice would you give them?
I would just say, especially for companies that are investigating franchise, we talk about this all the time. If you've got a great business model and you want to grow, focus on that unit level economics before you do anything else. Make sure that you have a business model inside your business. And that goes for young concepts, anybody, especially in the brick and mortar space, who's dealing with that cash flow balance, that break-even basis. And candidly, Susie, you and I talk about this all the time, the ability to bring new customers in and convert them into a more long-term basis. Make sure that is ironed out in your local facility before you go to try to scale that in the franchise space. We see it all the time. We talk to fitness, wellness, call them membership-based, service-based companies. Yep. That have, in some cases, they've succeeded in spite of themselves, right? They've got a great concept, really cool founder team, great community. They've attracted individuals to their business without much heavy lifting. They haven't had to, go run new ad campaigns. They haven't had to understand their lead funnel or, more importantly, their conversion process. Right. They have no idea if 200 leads converted to first show at 20%, then converted to membership at 5%, and 70% of which purchase an unlimited versus a pack. Like, they don't understand the client conversion process, which when they open new locations really becomes a hindrance to their new partner's ability to effectively grow. That process for us is just understand the basic levels of the unit economics of your business, and then make sure you take that and you grow that with the right partners in the appropriate markets. And the final piece of advice is take your time. Don't rush into anything. The industry, especially franchise industry today, has been seen as one that you need to go. Otherwise, you're going to get swooped up by somebody else, right? Someone else is going to overtake you. There's, how many hundreds of new businesses that file for franchises every year. So that fear of missing out on that market opportunity is constantly there for founders. We can't stress enough. Franchise is intended to be a long-term growth game. It's not intended to be something that overnight pops and you have unlimited wealth, right? It is
for sure. Yeah.
Take your time, be cognizant, and bring in the right partners. There's so many great groups out there, not just us at the franchise department. We're specific in what we do. We're not attorneys, we're not real estate brokers, we're not marketing experts. And we have, besides our own internal team, we have a vast network of assets that are really they are the reason that we can be successful with different groups. We bring in such a wealth of knowledge to the space that helps those brands scale. And without it, concepts wouldn't be able to grow, especially early. That your network, that third-party partnership network is so important. So I know it's a kind of a long piece of advice, but
I love it.
Understand your unit economics and lean on other smart people.
Definitely. I think the smart people is huge, and definitely don't take your time, right? Like, don't rush it. So many times I've rushed things and it was like, nope, I should have just took my time, right? So I think all of those are like super important, especially when you're in that franchise field, because you don't want to like screw up and waste time and money and essentially hurt your business, right? So take your time and rely on the business.
Hurt your business, and then the scary part is when you bring a franchise partner in, their life is now impacted directly by yours. They're bringing their life savings.
Oh, for sure.
They're taking a risk on you. I think it's your obligation to make sure that as a franchisor, you're prepared to support them and to candidly manage that investment and manage their livelihood.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You shared so much great information, and I'm sure many people, especially those emerging brands, can benefit from all of this. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Susie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening in on today's Brand Clarity episode with Susie Liberatore. 2 things. First and foremost, please, if you liked this episode, please subscribe and leave some positive reviews. Also, don't forget to sign up for Stop Sending Your Customers to the Competition and get my insider secrets to compelling branding that converts. You can find that at branding-bridge.com. It's a free workbook for you to check out right now, all of the branding techniques and strategies that I use for my paying clients.